welcome to the Mindset Michele TV show. We're so super excited for you to be joining us for another incredible episode with today's very special guest, the wonderful Allan Ryan. Hello, Allan.
Hey, Michele, how are you going?
It's so wonderful to have you joining the show today. And for those of you that aren't aware of who Allan is, he's this incredible, very seasoned entrepreneur, business owner, and all-around lovely gentleman. So Allan is the founder and executive director of the Hargreaves Institute. His middle, beginning, and last name is actually all about collaboration, and as you can see on the desk there, about collaborator. And he's also was a adjunct professor at the UTS Business School. But that's kind of the key headlines about Allan. Allan, do you want to share with everybody how you came to be doing what you're doing and what your passion is around collaboration and how you came to be doing it?
Thanks, Michele. So my history obviously goes back a long way. My first career was as an engineer in manufacturing, where I was responsible for developing new products. And then I transformed myself, going back to university, the Australian Graduate School of Management, and researching how established organisations can become more successful and more entrepreneurial. And that was what I really focused on. And that's my second career, which is around how do people become more successful and entrepreneurial. And I did all the research, and what I came up with was the one success factor that drove lots and lots of leaders was collaboration. And so I doubled down on collaboration. I set up my own business in 2002. So I was now 21 years of running my own consulting business. And with the one thing, which is how do you deliver growth through collaboration, entrepreneurship, success, mindset, and change?
Wow, what a succinct and wonderful explanation there, Allan. And I'm sure that a lot of the background in that first career in manufacturing taught you a lot about people as you kind of built on that so much more in your AGM studies, and then working now for 21 years. Congratulations. That's an awfully long time, but I was going to say an amazing achievement as well.
Thank you.
Well done. You know, there's not many organizations that can say that they've been around that long nowadays. So in terms of success then, what do you think it is for yourself, for you, given that you've had two main kind of careers and been successful for 21 odd years now? What do you think success today means to you?
Success to me is about relationships and about working with great people and really getting inspired. And what I love, and yes, I've been running this business now for 21 years, and we've had clients for 5 and 10 years, and we really focus on how you deliver that growth for people. So success is when I see, it's like a plant flourishing, when you see clients or businesses flourish and you know that you've had something to do with it at the start and you continue to hold their hands. And just recently it was on Saturday, one of our long-term clients rang me up and invited me for coffee because I was in his area. And the fact that clients ring you up and they talk to you and they value your insights and they trust you and you hold their hands over the whole journey of their business, as well as obviously helping my business. And so success to me is about that long-term growth, long-term relationships, and that just trust and value you create when you work with people. And so that's what I love to get out of bed for, and that's what I love to do. And it's like we like long-term, and we build long-term relationships with the organizations that we help.
And would you say that that's in the rest of your life, other life areas, that this focus on building long-term relationships is something that outside of Hargreaves Institute in the other areas is something that, you know, your values and your motivation is very much about building long-term, and whether it's a business or a personal kind of relationship, seeing the growth and that success with other people?
Well, my wife is not here, but she would probably agree with my focus on long-term, because we've been married about 40 years. So I've had a successful long-term relationship, And my kids, who are very adult kids, still love me. So I think that's another good long-term relationship. The reason why I like the long-term relationships is because I love the word nudge. And I love the word whereby you nudge relationships, or you nudge performance, or you just tweak things along. And if you and we all know the formula that if you change 1% a day in a year, you're 40 times bigger than you were at the start or something. So long-term relationships, nudging, improving, gently, I find is far more satisfying than rapid change or restructuring or trying to reinvent yourself overnight. And so, yeah, I believe in that building of relationships over time. I'm a member of a sports club that I've been a member for 10 years. I still catch up with people that I met at my first university course back in the, I'm not going to say how long back ago, but back then. And so, yeah, I'm very much focused on that long-term relationships with that trust, so that you can actually share things and actually help people. What it also means that I like is that sometimes it means that you can have really meaningful conversations. You can really have, some people say it's confronting conversations or tough conversations, but sometimes you have to help clients or even relatives or kids by having a tough conversation, a meaningful conversation. And the best way to do that is to have a really strong relationship. So I really go out of my way to build strong relationships so that I can have both great conversations and tough conversations with people.
And I think that this is one of the reasons, so thank you for elaborating a little bit more on that long term. I think one of the reasons I was interested when you were mentioning it is that so many people I speak to now, they've built new relationships with COVID and with everything, moving things online in many ways. People have now built new relationships in a new way with people that they may have never met in person. And it's because of this, you know, new technology, COVID making everybody at home for a couple of years. So I'm fascinated because, yes, some of those early relationships I created at the beginning of COVID have now become longer term, you know, 3-4 year relationships. And so I love, you know, the 40 years, congratulations, 21 years with the business and 40 years of marriage. I mean, these are really, really fabulous lifetime milestones.
Yeah, and thank you. And what I found during COVID, my COVID experience is, firstly, when we all started working remotely, our team came together very well. Our productivity improved, our team relationships dramatically improved. And I thought that our relationships with our clients and people outside the team would drop off because we weren't seeing them as much, we weren't having coffees, we weren't going to conferences. What we found was different. What we found was that we had to be more intentional about connecting with people outside the team. And we could build those relationships. And you're absolutely right. We could build relationships with people who we never would build relationships before COVID, because before COVID, we didn't do Zoom calls to people in the UK or to people in Germany or to people overseas. Everything was sort of more local. You did things face to face, which we all loved. But the diversity of the people we're collaborating with now is far, far larger than the diversity of the people we collaborated with before COVID. And one of the strengths of what I love to do, which is collaboration, is we've now built a global network of experts that help us. So I promise people, and what I love to say is, I can solve any problem. Any problem you have, I can solve, because I know so many people, and I can find someone that has probably solved your problem before you, or had your problem before. And now my network is so wide and so diverse and global that we can have this wonderful opportunity to tap into all these different knowledge banks and actually help people with proven expertise because of the diversity of the collaboration that we now do.
Wonderful. And we've kind of started going into a little bit, but I'll ask more specifically, what sort of suggestions and tips do you have for people if they're wanting to create that successful mindset? So I think we started to touch on one area there about reaching out and diversifying that network to a global network, because we now more than ever have the technology where you can connect with like-minded people or people in an area that you're looking to go and work in or study in. you can suddenly reach out to like global experts all over the world and talk to them about how they got started in their field, if you like. So what other sorts of tips or suggestions do you have for people to create their successful mindset?
Thanks. This is exactly the sort of thing that I share with my clients, and I actually, as they say, eat my own dog food, and I actually follow my own advice. And so my best few tips is that we don't call it a success mindset. We call it a dynamic capability. So dynamic capabilities are the capabilities people need to grow, whereas routine capabilities or ordinary capabilities are for people to do their day-to-day business. Dynamic or successful capabilities about what you need to grow. The best tip I can give people is they have to be slack. Now what I mean by that is not slack as in slack, but you have to find the time to actually pull yourself away from your business and think about the future. And so when I speak to very successful people, they can always find time to talk to me. They can always find time to do something different. They make it a point of not being busy, wherefore they don't talk to you, they delay for 2 weeks, etc. So my biggest tip, number one, is always make sure that you have time in your diary to focus on the future, to meet new people. And it's called slack and agility in the official language, where you actually have that time and make sure that you have that time. And the follow-up tip is that...
So before we go into that then, so just so I can, because you're using wonderfully like language that people may not be familiar with, like dynamic capabilities as opposed to routine capabilities. So you're talking about habits or suggestions that you're framing around doing things differently so you can grow rather than routine habits that kind of keep you in an everyday life. And slack or being slack is one of those habits, a dynamic capability habit. And what you mean by that is creating the time or choosing to have the time to actually meet new people and pull yourself out of the business and creating that time or job or whatever it might be in your everyday life, pulling yourself out of your everyday life to create that space for growth. Am I hearing that correctly?
You summarised that absolutely perfectly, and I'll slow down a little bit and help. Is that, yes, you have to have when you meet successful leaders, and I interview successful leaders all the time, they always have a bit of time. They can always find time. They arrange their diaries to have the time so they can meet new people, they can explore. And yes, the official term is they have some slack in their diary that they can actually use to do that. So my best tip for people is don't fall into the habit of busy, back-to-back meetings. Learn to delegate, learn to free up time, put some time in your diary, which is just for yourself, so that you have the slack to think about the future and do things that are different, especially if you're the leader. So that's the biggest tip that I would love to share.
I can't remember the movie, but I was just going to say there was a wonderful movie where it was exactly like that. There was a African-American woman that created a business, but even when and it was something simple like, Velcro, but she was able to make a business out of it and become, the first African, and it's terrible, I can't remember her name, I apologize. But she became the first African-American billionaire and all of this. And even when she became a billionaire, you're exactly right, she still had the time to meet the mums and pups that came in with other new ideas, because she understood that they were the people that were going to solve the everyday problems, and that the gold, if you like, of new ideas was with these people that were already outside of the system. And I hear that that's what you're saying. If you're doing your job and you're very busy, you don't have the time or create the time to then go and hear from somebody that's going to say, well, actually, I do it this way. And suddenly something that might take you half a day, you can see, oh, here's something now that will take me, 10 minutes to do what I used to do. But if you haven't created that time, you wouldn't be hearing those new insider information.
Correct. And absolutely correct. And it's also, a lot of leaders think they're being a great leader because they're so busy. because they fill their diaries up. They do lots of busy work, whereas a great leader has some slack. And so once you have some slack, then you can learn and network and collaborate, etc. The second thing that I absolutely believe in is that sometimes you've got to take a step back to take 2 steps forward. And so a lot of leaders and a lot of growth people, and I myself think we just got to keep growing, and we've got to focus on everything. Whereas sometimes you've actually got to stop a product or stop and cancel something and cannibalize something and just stop, take a step back, stop something that's too hard or not delivering enough value for you before you emerge and go forward again, right? So when you think about business, it's not a continuous growth curve. You don't just grow like a continuous curve. You go up, but then you come back a bit, then you go up, and then you come back a bit, and you go up, and you come back a bit. And so a lot of leaders realize you can actually lead better by going backwards just a bit before you go forwards again. Maybe you've got to stop something, maybe you've got to close down something, maybe you've got to rejig something, and re-energize. So one of the things that I do it all the time, I go through our products, our services, even some of our clients, and say, are these clients more effort than they're worth? Are these products, is it time to stop that product? And one of my team members said, yes, but we still make a little bit of money out of that product. And I said, yeah, but it's time to stop. We can spend that effort doing something better. So let's stop and yes, we're going to make a little bit less money in this particular quarter, but we're probably going to grow a hell of a lot faster in the next quarter. So it's like, yeah, take 1 step back to take 2 steps forward. And leaders can do it because leaders can make those tough decisions around, I'm going to stop doing something. And when I mean stop doing something, and I find this really hard in my own business, is you don't put it on the bottom of the priority list. You don't say, I'll get to it. You say, no, I'm stopping that. That's never going to come up again. We're never going to do it again. That's dead. We are going to move on to something new. And that's how you clear the decks, and that's how you maintain your focus. And so that's really critical, taking a step back. And I do it all the time. Take a step back to take 2 steps forward.
What an incredible and powerful suggestion. Thank you so much again, Allan, because I really hear, we work with people a lot around focus and where are you focusing? If you think about it, you've got this cup and that's your energy and your time. And so what are you putting into that cup? What are you spending your time and your focus on? And I love this idea that you're talking about reevaluating what's in the cup and going with some of it. Well, actually, I'm just going to stop that. And it may mean less money, less time, less energy for that little bit of time, but you're doing it to invest in something bigger, which is how am I going to use my energy, my time, my money, my very valuable cup in a better and better way. And I know, again, it's something that because it's a habit, and I was talking the other day about stopping smoking and stopping drinking and those types of habits. Though these habits can be things where you actually have to keep consciously focusing on, oh, actually, I've stopped doing that. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm, doing this instead. I'm doing this instead. I'm not sure if you heard that great example about if you're weeding the front garden, you don't just weed the front garden and then leave it because you're leaving all those holes for the new weeds to grow back into. Once you've weeded the front garden, you actually still need to fill in those holes with something so that the old weeds don't grow back. So that's stopping and working out, well, which of the weeds in my cup analogy am I going to pull out? And then working out when you stopped, what am I going to put back in there? And the other thing I love saying to people is to lean into it. So it means that whatever you put back into that cup, you actually don't have to say, oh, I'm going to stick with that now for the next 100,000 years. You can lean into it. And if it doesn't work for you, then take that out again the next time you stop and review what you're doing.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And I like it's like a habit. When you say I'm going to stop drinking, if that's the case, then it's a stop. It's a zero, right? And you just make that decision. It's not like I'm going to drink less, then maybe you'll drink more, or maybe you'll not drink less. And it's a lot more to see, am I drinking enough, not enough? Sometimes it's easier just to say, no, stop. We're not going to do that, right? Which is why, and I like the word nudge, right? Because if you're going to make changes, you don't want to radically make a change around, we're going to stop drinking, I'm going to get fit, I'm going to do all these 20 different things. It's, if you're going to go weed, you go weed and you nudge, you do a little bit, then you fill it in and you do a bit more, and if you just keep pushing that gentleness of a nudge, then you can make big changes without the big risk, right? You don't risk by ripping up your whole front yard and say, I'm going to replant the front yard. And so it's like, that's where the long-term change happens a little bit at a time.
I also like, I was just going to say, with this image I've created now of the front yard of the weeds in it, I also like the word nudge for that, because if you decided to go there one day and pull out every single weed, you might hurt your back. But with the nudge idea, if you go out and do a little bit until you feel tired and recognize, because you're also training yourself to recognize when you feel tired and stop, and then go back another day and do a little bit more. So that nudging idea means that you're recognizing that, and I love this expression, life is a marathon, not a sprint. So you want to be doing things in these incremental 1% that you were talking about, so that you can keep doing them and keep building on them, rather than, many of the get fit quick, go to the gym every day and then you injure yourself because you've gone from 0 to every day and end up hurting yourself, as opposed to
or you
leaning
get sick
into
of it and you just don't go again. Yes.
Or you get sick of it. Yeah.
And so I think that's, and it's like I asked, I was at an event with a whole bunch of people, and I asked them, put your hand up if you've been through a restructure, and everyone put their hand up. And then I said, well, put your hand up if the restructure worked, and nobody had their hand up, right? And then I said, put your hand up if you've been through a transformation. And a transformation is a series of nudges. A transformation is a bottom-up change process. And a lot of people put their hands up because we've all been through digital transformations and stuff like that. And then I said, keep your hand up if you think it worked. And they all kept their hand up. And so my biggest recommendation around nudging is don't restructure, don't do the big bang, don't do I'm going to radically change my life, I'm going to do all these sorts of things, because they fail and you don't get the results you think you're going to get, which is a restructure, as compared to a transformation or a nudge. Where, and as you said, if it doesn't work, if you lean in and it doesn't work, then you can come back. And that's another mindset for success or dynamic capability, is to, if you fail, say stop, I've failed, and then move forward again, right? And so that's a really powerful tool. But by nudging and doing small things, you can only fail in a small way, and then you can recover quickly and move forward, rather than a big restructure. And so you can't afford for a big restructure to fail, and most of them do. And so nudging, transformation, bringing people along on the journey works for me.
I completely agree. I love your distinction between restructures and transformation, because I feel like the generation of restructures and transformation, like I don't think I've ever worked for any company that wasn't doing some sort of dramatic change. Nowadays it's technology and digital transformation, but there's always been some form of change in the organizations I've worked with. And you're exactly right. Although at the beginning there's this huge focus on, we're going to do it within 2 years and it's going to happen and everything's going to work out perfect, by the 18-month mark, they realise it's actually going to take 5 years and it takes longer, and et cetera, et cetera. But those companies are the ones that actually, after the 5 years, they go through the transformation, they go through the change with staff, et cetera, and it works. But the ones that still try to cram it in within the 2 years, it fails quite dramatically. Yeah. And I think it's a great example of that nudge.
Yeah, and it's and you can't afford to fail big things. You can afford to fail little things. Lean in, didn't quite work, lean out. But if you're doing something big, just don't risk and do a big failure, right? I don't do it in my business. You just shouldn't do it. And even big organizations, if they spend millions and millions of dollars and then it fails, not only do they waste the money, they've also wasted 2 years of time, right? So they could have been doing something else, but they spent all this time and effort doing a transformation that doesn't work. And so that's really, and it's one of those things that I always remind people of, which is what I said about, if you have good relationships, you can have tough conversations, and always say meaningful conversations or tough conversations. If you can have a tough conversation with your boss or with your partner and say, this is not working, let's stop. Let's take the hit. let's throw the money down the drain. It's stop. Let's renew it rather than spending good money after bad. You need strong relationships to be able to have those tough decisions. That's what a dynamic capability is to be able to have that tough, conflicting, heart-to-heart conversation that makes really tough decisions, because you'll be stronger for it, rather than saying, well, it's not quite working, but let's just keep going. Or I don't want to upset somebody, so let's just keep going. That's the absolute worst thing you can do.
And I guess that many of the people watching, and they may or may not have a business, and they may or may not have a career, but they would also, I mean, all of this is applicable to that ultimate conversation and the ultimate nudge, which is actually with yourself. So everything we're talking about leaning in, whether it's trying a gym or trying different ways of weeding the front lawn, but it's building those dynamic capabilities within yourself. And I loved how you were talking then about the meaningful. I like the change as well between difficult to meaningful, the meaningful conversations. So having that meaningful conversation with yourself where you're actually looking in a very realistic way, and it can be emotional, but recognizing the emotions and recognizing the good and the bad, or the costs, etc., and the benefits of something. But having those meaningful conversations with yourself around, well, I've been doing this career and I love to do it and I keep up to date, etc., etc. But the reality is that, technology means that career and that profession won't exist in its current form in a few years' time. So now is a wonderful opportunity or a time where I can lean into different areas and choose which one I then want to go into, as opposed to, say, in a few years' time where your industry may be in a lot more disruption because of technology, and you're maybe forced into an area that you may not have chosen. So I think that this is where talking about the nudges and the stopping to have a look at things like that is it can be difficult, but it's meaningful conversations to have with yourself.
Absolutely. And one of the best stories is when I was teaching my kids to drive, and you'd sit side by side in the front of the car and you'd have some wonderful, meaningful conversations with your kids while they're driving, because they're stuck with you for the hour of the driving lesson, right? Whereas they wouldn't listen to me at home, right? So one of the best lessons I learned from teaching my kids to drive is you can have much better, more meaningful conversations, tough conversations, whatever you want to call them, when you sit beside somebody and you're not looking at them, right? Like sitting at a bar, having a drink, sitting at a coffee shop and not looking at each other, or sitting in the car. And that takes a lot of the pressure off people because you're not being looked at, right? And so if you really want to create trust and have meaningful conversations with people, try to do it in a car, or try to do it sitting side by side, where you're not having the pressure of looking at someone, or when you're both looking at something like a computer screen or a document or something like that. When you go to have a coffee with someone, my best recommendation is don't sit opposite them. Sit beside them, share their space, and you can have some really tough conversations and open conversations with them, because sometimes just looking at people in the eye means that it puts a lot of pressure on people. And so, having a meaningful conversation, sit with people, don't sit opposite people.
I really love that. That's a very, very useful tip again about not sitting so that you're looking straight at somebody in the eye, but sitting next to them so that you're both perhaps looking off into the clouds or the sky in the distance. And then that actually helps you to not feel like you're in more of that confrontational. Allan, there's so much more I know we could keep talking about, but what's the best way for people to get hold of you?
Well, as the collaborator, first, middle and last name, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. I'd love you to reach out. I connect with everyone that connects with me. We post lots and lots of really valuable stuff from both myself, Allan Ryan, and Hargraves Institute. Follow Hargraves and you'll learn an awful lot, and we're really happy to share. And if anyone pings me a message, I always answer.
Oh, wonderful. And Allan, the final question then is, if you were to give some advice to your younger self, what might that advice be?
The best advice I can give my younger self is put your oxygen mask on first and then help others. So my best advice to my younger self is look after yourself first, make sure you're strong, you're happy, you're competent, you're happy within yourself, and then look after other people. And so even though I'm a collaborator and I spend all my time looking after other people, helping clients, I have to make sure that I'm in a good place, that I'm confident, that I'm happy, that I'm well. So put on your oxygen mask first and then look after others, right, is the best advice, because you have to be strong in order to help other people.
I love that. I really love, and remember when I first heard that analogy of putting on your own mask first. It was the best example I saw of, or I know of that whole philosophy of, you know, taking care of yourself so you can then help to take care of others. Allan, it's been such an absolute pleasure having you on the show today.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it, and I've learned something as well.
Fabulous. Well, thank you, Allan, and thank you to all the viewers for watching. It's been another incredible, very, very value-packed show with all the incredible insights from our guest, Allan, today. But for now, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.